AO Broyles here, and we are going to talk about adding a selective area of blur, or actually a selective area of focus, meaning we're going to blur the background and leave an object in the center or wherever in focus. So, kind of what I'm talking about is this to where we want to add some emphasis to the person. And this is the photo that I could find. It happens to just be me at Halloween, but we are going to learn how to do this. And in the last tutorial, you learned how to add a vignette to add even more emphasis or the focal point to where you want the viewer's eye to go. So I'm going to get rid of these for now and then just show you, starting with my image. I went to File, Open. I opened my image. I'm going to go right ahead and go File, Save As. I'm going to call this Selective Focus as my skill builder practice. Notice I always leave the image name in there so I can find it, keep my stuff in documents. And then I'm going to make sure this is a Photoshop file, even if I started as a JPEG. I'm going to save it as a Photoshop file. Oh, I'm also going to save it to the cloud so that it is in the cloud for saving. Whew. All right, so now that's all done. It's good to get that out of the way before we're busy at the end of class. Look at all this extra stuff in the classroom I don't want to show you. So again, we don't want to destroy any of our layers. So I'm going to duplicate the layer first. So right click on the background and click OK. I'm going to get an extra copy of this. This is what I need to work on here. From here, we're going to do a little trick. We are going to add a layer mask. Okay. In the past, we added like an adjustment layer up here, and that added an adjustment layer with a mask. On this layer here, if you look down in the bottom of your layers panel, there is a tiny little mask icon. If I click that, it's going to add a layer mask to this layer. So what this is going to do is I'm going to come over here. I'm going to go to my I'm going to go to my gradient tool. Excuse me. Clicked on shape. Go to my gradient tool. Make sure my foreground and background are black to white. So default black and white, flip it to black in the front. I'm going to come up here, and on my options, I'm on top now. Instead of linear gradient, I'm going to click this radial gradient. Okay. This means when I click and drag, it's going to create a circle effect. And you can see over in my mask here, it gave me a circle effect. And it doesn't look like it did anything, but if I turn my bottom layer off, look, I have just said, hey, don't show that middle part of this layer. So what's going to happen is when I take this layer and I'm going to add a blur to it, okay? So a blur is not an adjustment layer up here that we've been used to. A blur is actually a filter. So if I go up to the top menu up here and go to filter, I go to blur. There's lots of different types of blur. I'm going to go with Gaussian blur. It's my favorite blur. It's kind of a round blur. And I click on Gaussian blur. And at first look, it's this white thing. Boo. You know why? It's because I'm on my mask. I want to get back to my pixels. So I'm going to move the little white box over here. Filter, blur, Gaussian blur. It's going to give me a box where I can determine how much blur I want. So I'm going to blur a pretty good amount because I don't want to see it, but not too much. That's good. And then I'll click OK. So now I've got my blur layer. I'm showing through the top. But notice it got part of my bird. So just like we did in the past, I'm going to click on the layer mask over here. I'm going to grab my paintbrush. I'm still on black. I'm going to make sure my paintbrush is a soft round brush. Make sure the hardness is at 0. And then I'm going to come over here, and if I go and paint more black in here, I am allowing the bird to show through. So I'm painting in the blur, okay? And I'm doing that using the black. You can see that little black piece over my layer just added in. If I want a very feathered edge, I might go make my brush bigger, and maybe I paint over my shirt because I don't really want this to be blurred out. And there we go. So I have this blur here. If I think this is too much, I can always go to my opacity and I can pull down the opacity of that blur just to give it like a little less. So there are some slight adjustments you can make. So in a sense, that's selective blur. You control it with the mask. And then as a quick review, just to show you how quick you can do it, if I wanted to then add a vignette to this, I would just draw that shape uh, on my shape properties. Make sure that I'm on the shape property. I'm going to go to the Pathfinder, flip it, go to the mask over here, which is this little button right here. Feather that mask, and then that's way too much. So I'm going to go down to my opacity and I'm going to pull that opacity down. Okay, click off of it to get it without the shape. And then just that shape there of a vignette adds even more emphasis to your subject. So I'm going to pull that down a little bit more. So without these, the picture is a really, really busy. Adding that selective blur and adding that vignette is actually making me look so much better. So if I wanted this blur, so say I wanted it really blurry on the edges, and then I wanted it to taper off here, the other technique is going into the mask with the paintbrush. If I make my opacity really low, I can go and start, make sure you're on your mask, painting in black. I can go and pull, this is like painting like 15% in of black. So it is saying, hey, oh, I don't want to do it over there. I just want it to fade in a little bit so it's not so harsh. The other thing I can do is if I want to paint in white, so if I come over here and I start painting in white, it's going to paint in the blur. So just to show you, I'm going to go back to opacity 100%. That is painting in the blur. So if I decide my shirt and my arm aren't really that important, I have the controls of coming back in here and painting back in that blur. I could paint in that. Maybe that piece of paper doesn't need to be shown. I feel like I'm all so proud of my face. So I could paint that all in. So if you look, I painted in all that white. I can go back into black. I can pull the opacity down. And then if I wanted to, I can soften some of that or even opacity further down and then build kind of up this little gradient here. So in a sense, that is how selective focus works. All right. Thanks for watching. Make sure you go to File, save it as a PSD in the cloud like we already have. So you're going to save over what you did, and then you're going to go to File, you're going to go to Export, and you're going to go to Quick Export as PNG. Make sure you save it in Documents, and then click Save. Turn that example in. If you notice, there's a lot of different things you can do with it. Like the next one is I need to do these flowers because the background is too busy. So that's it for today. Thanks for watching. I'm going to turn you off now.